Welcome back to the You Not Me podcast. At the time of this recording, it is our first recording in 2026. And with that, we're stepping into a little bit of a new era in You Not Me with a new addition to our team in Andrew McCartney. Andrew, welcome in.
Thank you so much, Jared. I'm thrilled to be here. And after spending 27 years in corporate America in training and development and recruiting and crisis management, I'm just thrilled to be working with both of you. I've been married to my amazing bride since 1998. And I have 3 amazing adult kids, and I also actively serve in 2 nonprofits supporting people with disabilities.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you, Andrew, and what a blessing it is for you to join us with your, not just your expertise, but more importantly, your heart and your care for people. So you're just an amazing compliment to the team. So we're super excited to have you.
Yeah, for all the listeners, we're definitely looking forward to all the perspectives that Andrew can bring to our team, and we hope that you'll definitely benefit, and I know that you'll learn a lot from him and his experiences. In this episode today, we're going to talk about the seasons of life. Everyone uses phrasing like this, whether they're talking about weather, whether they're talking about sports or school years or even aging. And seasons each have their own purpose. They have a common language, but different purposes. For example, in winter, classic thoughts of winter, the bear going into the cave to hibernate for the winter and gather up his resources and rest and be inside and in warmth. Spring is a time where we see lots of new life and growth. Summer is obviously enjoying a lot of the benefits of the warmth and being able to be outside and more active. And then the fall is kind of circling back to the spring in terms of reaping and producing a harvest for all the things that were sown in the spring. But seasons of life are not so much about comfort, but they're more about formation. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 3 that there's a season for everything. And that's definitely true in life, especially when we're thinking about aging and making a difference in the lives of others around us. The central question that we want to ask today is, if seasons govern nature, what season is governing you where you're at in your life right now? And I think that one thing that's really key for listeners is, there's probably a lot of you out there who maybe feel a little bit stuck. And that's okay. It's why this episode's here today. So Chris and Andrew, why is it that most people feel stuck and stalled with where they're at in whatever season of life they find themselves?
I know I've been in this season myself is a lot of times it's just clouded with busyness. And so often, I know, we've talked about a lot, is it's kind of like a leaf that's fallen, in the fall. It's on the ground and the wind's blowing and it's moving about. It looks active and busy, but it's accomplishing nothing. And so I think so often we can spin our wheels on things that don't really matter. And just because our phone is dinging constantly, Teams, alerts, email notifications, et cetera, we can be busy and running all over the place, but we haven't been intentional with our direction and our time. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to do is make sure we step back and zoom out and look at what's the most important thing, especially like we're going to talk about today is in, different decades of life and different seasons. And yes, all the things we talk about can be done in differing decades and seasons, but there are things that if you do them really, really well now in the season you're in, it's going to pay dividends and compound interest, and it's going to build upon itself for the future.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think the urgent is also always competing for our time. And we don't realize what we've sacrificed until it's too late. And, what doesn't matter what season you're in, I think it's important to know that we do have the power to create and control boundaries on kind of how we spend our time and where we invest our time. And it's important that we don't give that power to something else. And there's different things that we can talk through today, but I think that's always a balance of how do you focus on what's urgent versus important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those 2 non-negotiables that you just hit on when we're talking about seasons in life and things like this is time, which we're going to define as when something should happen, and then focus, which is really talking about what deserves your energy. There's also 3 clarifying truths that we want to hit today. In every season, obviously, you need to have a focus and there is a certain time given. And today we're really going to be breaking out that time by decades. But there's 3 different realities that you can kind of be in wherever you are in whatever season you're in. And that's that you can have the wrong focus at the right time, which will limit your growth. You can have the right focus at the wrong time, which will limit your effectiveness. Or you can have the right focus at the right time, which will lead to compounding returns. An easy example of this is to think about drinking a double espresso at 9 a.m. versus 9 p.m. It might be helpful to energize yourself with a coffee at 9 a.m., but if you're having one at 9 p.m., it's going to be hard for you to wind down. And that's obviously going to negatively affect you down the road. So the question isn't so much what you should do with your life, it's more so what you should focus on in whatever season of life that you're in right now.
I think what's interesting too is now, having just turned 50 this past year, is what I've seen is that whether it's reading the same scripture verse when I was in my 30s to when I'm in my 50s, it may have a different meaning because of life experiences that have happened or current, circumstances that you're going through. And I think what's most important is to, also remember that life is all about growth. And when we see or go through something at one stage and we go through a very similar thing later on, years down the road, it's going to hit us differently, and we're going to react to it differently. And hopefully if it's later, hopefully we've learned from the first time. There's wisdom gained from watching other people or people that model it well, or maybe from mistakes that we've made, and how do we learn and grow from those. So I think that's the other important thing is just remembering that things will sometimes keep repeating themselves and popping up in life. And the hope is in a different stage, you might see it differently. Because I know looking at work in your 20s versus work in your 50s or 60s, and then also your kid when when they're young versus when they're adults, it's two different time periods. And so it changes, but also ultimately, I think as you get older, one of the things that happens is you see what really matters most. And so that's, I mean, at least for Andrew and I, we get to expand upon a little wisdom with the bald spot and things that have come with age that I've learned, but also, how I would do it differently. And at times things that I look at now that I speak to my boys about that are in their 20s, I wish I would have known that in my 20s. But would I have been wise enough to understand it in my 20s? That's another question. So I think the biggest thing is taking the time to learn from people that have been there, done that, and get their wisdom and perspective. But ultimately, if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s or your teens or your 30s, hopefully there's a wealth of knowledge that you can use to learn and grow.
And I think, Chris, it's the importance of being in community with people from other generations. And if you're only spending time with people that are your age, you're really missing out. And that's where my wife and I, right out of college, we were part of a small group that had many different people from kind of different ages and different generations, and just understanding and living life with people that can give you wisdom and perspective when you're going through something that is may feel impossible, but other people have been through that and they can tell you, hey, this is really what life is going to be like on the other side of that. Just you need that perspective. It's really, really important.
We're now going to dig into the seasons of life, and we're just going to really run decade by decade, starting with really the teenage years. And in each of these decades, we're going to take a look at three different things that each season includes. The first one is just going to be the primary focus, which is really just what matters most in this decade. Concrete steps, which is really just what can you do today, this year, not 5 years, 10 years in the future. And then lastly, we're going to talk about why it matters. So if we're just going to start with the teenage years here, this is really like identity and character formation, ages 10 to 20. What are some of the primary focuses that people need to be thinking about if they're in these age ranges?
Well, I think something that immediately comes to mind is just how social media has changed things over the last, 15, almost like 15 to 20 years. That social media has created this perception that everybody else has it all together. And it's becoming more and more clear that we need to steer away from social media and away from kind of looking at other people's lives in that way. I just find it interesting that Steve Jobs, who invented the smartphone, Mark Zuckerberg, who started Facebook and owns Instagram, they famously either did not or do not allow their kids to have unrestricted use of their phones and social media. Stress and anxiety are through the roof. Research shows that that heavy use of social media just doubles the risk of depression and anxiety symptoms. Suicide and suicidal ideation are up 50 to 60%. Disproportionately affects girls. Loneliness is increased as a result of kind of overuse of social media. And again, I just think there's this notion of, if you are in this age group, you need to be thinking about, where are you hearing kind of voices? Like, who is talking to you? And are you hearing guidance and wisdom from wise people? Or are you kind of getting guidance and wisdom from a social media side that is absolutely filtered and presented in a way that's not accurate.
Yeah, I think even often a lot of times those people don't even care about you, right? They're just trying to gain more followers, gain traction, and ultimately it's going back to hopefully you have great parents that love you well and that are really trying to speak into you. But oftentimes in our teens, sometimes we give more credence to what a coach tells us than what our own parents do. And again, I think it's kind of to your point is finding people that are different ages. And I know, I mean, Jared's been an amazing role model for my two boys even though it's only about a 10 or so, 8 or 10 year difference. I mean, how impactful he's been. And it's again, finding people in the next decade or a couple decades above you that you really admire and look up to with the way that they're choosing to live their life and love people and really just get close to them, ask them questions. Again, when you find someone that really truly cares about you, stick close to that person because it's, we all need that, but also it's rare to find, especially on social media too often. It's about just followers and money and likes instead of really truly like walking hand in hand, with you on a journey. And I think that's what we need more of is people around us because the loneliness is at a, all time high.
Yeah, and I think it's asking people and being bold and asking somebody, "Hey, would you be willing to spend time with me? I want to understand, here are some things that I'm going through personally, or I'm about to start kind of this phase of my life. What advice do you have?" I went to coffee with somebody recently and we had that type of conversation. And it's just, I think if you're bold, but you need to seek out that community and really help to kind of build that around yourself.
Yeah, and we've hit on a few of them here, but any other concrete steps that you would have for how people can start to build their foundation in this stage?
I think, I mean, one of the things, especially in your teens, is just learning to be disciplined to where just the little things like, do you get up in the morning and do you make your bed? Do you work out or do something? How do you show up on time and honor and respect people, whether it's a coach, whether it's a teacher, friends, etc. Because I think so often people just fly by the seat of their pants and they don't understand that there are a lot of other people that if they're expecting them at a certain time, they're waiting for you. And out of just pure respect, just to be on time or really to be a little bit early. And just those little habits like that and being honest with how you speak and being genuine and being consistent in who you are because this age, this, teenage years is really when you build the foundation of who you are as a person and what you're actually walking toward because too often we just go by each day and do what comes instead of thinking about like what am I actually really walking towards and who do I want to become. And I know with my own boys that's what I keep talking to them about is just thinking about who it is that you want to be when you're older. And my oldest, when he was home over break, we had two families over that are both in their later 20s to early 30s and they have young kids and we had just had a great time. They know him from past soccer, from playing and coaching. And the next day, my oldest said, I really want to make sure this year that I'm thinking about who it is that I want to become in order to become the father that I want to be for my own kids because he saw them being amazing fathers. And it just really sparked something in, even though I've said it many times, you never know when that aha moment comes. But just to hear him say like, okay, I really see how important it is that now in my, even though he's 22, you can start doing this when you're in your teens and really saying like, who do I want to become as far as having integrity, caring about people, all that stuff. And I think those little things go a long way over time.
I also think it's important to check yourself around who are the people that you've surrounded yourself with. So people that are kind of your age group, kind of who's in your friend group. What is the saying? Show me the five closest friends, and I'll show you your future. And it really is important that you recognize who are those people that are speaking life kind of into me that we're doing life with, and either that group is bringing you up and helping you to become the man or the woman that God designed you to be, or they're taking you down the wrong way and the wrong path.
Yeah, this is really the decade I think that builds the internal compass that life will inevitably end up testing later on down the road. So while this season doesn't determine your success or your future, it definitely determines the foundation that you take into the future. Now we're going to look at the 20s, which predominantly is going to have to do with building skills, work ethic, and forming relationships. What are some of the primary focuses in this decade?
One of the best pieces of advice that I received early on in my career was somebody sat down with me who was at the company I was with and asked me, who are the most influential people that can help shape and mold and grow your career here? And so he and I came up with that list together. And that really became almost a personal board of directors. Who are those people that are kind of people that I can go to for guidance and perspective and wisdom, and who can give me real honest feedback. And I think that that's one of the pieces when you think about mentorship, and you think about you need people who are comfortable speaking truth into you, and you need to be open to that. And asking for feedback and being open to it are two different things. I don't know if we all love kind of hearing honest things and hearing honest feedback. That's what we need. We need to be humble and be able to listen for kind of what are those areas that I need to grow in, and be very intentional around that. So I think it's that whole board of directors piece, kind of a personal board of directors, was something that was just really influential for me early on in my career in that age group.
Think the other thing is when you look at, in your early 20s, you probably just went to college a year or two ago. And I think one of the things that's really hard now for a lot of young people is transitioning from high school and, this group that you lived in the same area or whatever, and you have people now coming from all different states blended together. And whether it's your roommate or suite mates, or, you join a fraternity, sorority, or play a sport, or whatever it is you're doing in college, it's really a small kind of microcosm of life, to where you're being put in an environment, and it's like, okay, how do you learn how to build good relationships? How do you learn to actually care more about other people than just yourself, to where, when I say care more about people, like, get to know them, ask them questions, and how do you build, what a healthy relationship looks like? Because I know, Andrew, you and I have talked about this, is, in those May hires that are coming straight from college, there are a lot that don't know how to build great relationships with their colleagues. They don't know how to work well with somebody that's in a place of a supervisor role or whatever. And so in these early 20s, while you're in college, it's taking the time to really get to know people and serve people, and becoming dependable when you show up just as a friend to people, much less as then when you transition to a job, and then when you transition to dating somebody, possibly getting married. It all keeps building, but really understanding what good relationships look like, and how it's ultimately, again, focused on living out the you, not me mindset, is actually putting other people above yourself and caring more deeply about understanding and knowing who they are and helping them get better. And then how that builds an amazing relationship of trust, and a long-term relationship.
And it's really about where are those areas that you can plug in to get that community? Are there groups you can volunteer with? Are there churches you can join? Is there a running club or a adult kind of sports league you can be a part of? Things that can foster healthy community, because I think it's important to remember that, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, there has been so much movement towards social media and online, that we need to be intentional about building kind of in-person healthy community. And the reality is that every single person in this age group, they need community. They want that. They desire that. It takes courage. Finding community is really hard. It really is. But in Charlotte, where I live, there are a lot of great areas and very kind of healthy, active ways to kind of build community and get involved. And it just means everything in the world to the people that I talk to.
Yeah, if you're right out of college, or even if you've been at a corporation, or a place for a number of years, you feel like, oh, well, I'm young, kind of lower on the tier, but you can lead from where you are. And I think it's just taking the time to step back and say, like, what does leadership even look like? And it's not that you have authority to tell people what to do. Leadership is caring about people, showing up, working hard, and doing excellent work, and helping people along the way. And then when other new people come in, can you be that person that maybe you didn't have, that you say, hey, I noticed you just started. Welcome. If you have any questions, let me help you out. Go out and grab a meal or a coffee or whatever, and get to know them. Because I think the biggest thing is people often forget what good looks like when it comes to just even entry to a new place, or a new job, or a new area to live. And what a blessing it is when somebody notices that you move into a new house, and they come over and they bring you flowers, or they bring you cookies or whatever, just to welcome you to the neighborhood, just to make you feel like, A, you're seen, B, you have someone that you can reach out to, and that they want to get to know you.
I think that um, why it matters to have the right focus in this season of life is because competence and character together are what build trust. And I think in your 20s, as you're starting out, to really establish yourself in your career and kind of decide a pattern that you're going to go for the rest of your life, obviously keeping the door open to pivots and unexpected turns. But being a person that's trustworthy, that people can count on, is really one of those things. And I think, as you guys mentioned, with building relationships, having mentors, seeking out opportunities for other people to invest into your life, but also taking personal responsibility to lead from wherever you are, whether you're in an entry role or you're, say, the lowest guy on the professional sports team roster that you're on as a rookie, whatever it might be. Being a person that's trustworthy is something that's going to propel you in a promising trajectory in the rest of your life.
And I think something else that I'd like to add to this too is remember that even if you're young, don't let that intimidate you. You know, you have earned the seat that you're in. And what I've seen in the workplace are that you have a lot of people that are young and just starting out, and they have a lot of wisdom and perspective, and people are looking for that. You know, they're looking for you to come in and make an impact and make a difference, and leverage and be a leader, be a leader. And just like Chris and Jared have said, this is really an opportunity for you to kind of set the table for the values in which you will lead your life, both at work and at home, and making sure that you are carving out intentional time to build that community. I just think it's important that we remember that it's building intentional relationships and investing in that, and don't sacrifice that, because that's what's most important.
Yeah, when one sometimes is having hard conversations with yourself and reflecting on things that maybe you need to be honest with yourself about, but also in the workplace when you're young, sometimes people, whether it's they try to take advantage of you or they try to teach you and maybe they don't do it in the best way. So can you be coachable? Can you also have hard conversations with people? You know, there's the story of the cow and the buffalo and how they react differently to the storms. And the cow senses the storm just like the buffalo senses the storm, but the cow goes running away from the storm and the storm eventually catches it. And then the cow actually stays in the storm longer than it needs to because it keeps trying to run away from it, where the buffalo senses the storm, turns and faces it and runs straight into the storm. They're actually in it sooner, but they go through it much quicker. And I think too often, and I know for me being more of a people pleaser than I am, I really don't like confrontation. But what I've learned is as I've gotten older, especially in your 20s, is again, be coachable, but also be willing to have those hard conversations and don't run away from struggles or things that are hard or awkward, or maybe it's a stressful relationship or a hard person at work. Confront them head on in a kind and loving way, in a humble way, and just try to get to know them and understand them, but also at the same time help them know your story and what you're trying to do, because one of the best things you can do is not shy away from hard conversations and face them head on, because if you keep running from them, eventually they catch up to you and it may make it way worse than if you had just taken and tackled it head on right away.
And mistakes will happen. I
Mm,
think that's a lot of like early anxiety is I have to be perfect. I have to
mm.
show my company, my manager that I'm perfect. I don't make mistakes. The reality is we all make mistakes. I've made 5 mistakes or more today already. And we're really a product of not making mistakes, but really a product of how do we respond to that? And how can you approach that and look in and expect that, hey, things aren't going to go well all the time, but that's okay. And what's important is that you learn from that and apply that. And especially during these formative years of your career in life, you're going to hit those pitfalls. And I think it's important to know that, expect that it happens to everybody, and that we then learn and grow from that.
And there's actually nothing more respected than someone that's young, that's made a mistake, that raises their hand and says, "Hey, I want to hold myself accountable and I made a mistake. How can you help me learn and grow from this?" versus trying to hide it and run away from it.
I've spent a lot of years in my working for the past 3 companies in recruiting. And that's one of the first questions I ask people is really around, tell me a time that you basically made a mistake and what did you learn from it? And what's interesting is how many times people would say, gosh, I can't think of anything. And I'm like, wow, okay. Well, I've kind of made up my mind on somebody that can't kind of introspectively look and identify an area that things didn't go well. You're not being honest with yourself. And I love how you said that, Chris, because it is viewed as true leadership when somebody young steps forward and says, "Hey, this did not go well. This did not go as planned. This is what I've learned from it," or help me to think through how I could approach this differently. That's real leadership.
If we're going to shift gears now into the 30s, which really has to do with purpose, family, and impact, what are some of the primary focuses that people can look to in their 30s?
I mean, this is really where the rubber meets the road. There are so many competing priorities for our time. It just there's a pressure to over index on work, and this is where I see debt as a big problem for people. That it's that pressure of kind of living living a lifestyle, living beyond your means, and have this debt cloud over you that really drives you to sacrifice more of your time for work than your family and others. What is it that Dave Ramsey says? We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And I think that it's important at this time that we really think about, one, living within our means, but two, really, how do we invest our time with those we love most? It can be very easy to over-index our time on work and spend an inordinate amount of time on work. But if you're a parent and if you have kids, 80 or 90% of the entire time that you're going to spend with your kids in their lifetime, in your lifetime, in their lifetime, is going to be over by the time they're 18. And so you need to make sure that you are investing your time in the right way.
Yeah, I was grabbing a meal with a good friend the other day, and we were just talking about life and family, and he showed me a picture of a post his son did for 2025, and just to see where that young man is and from things he's gone through in his life, and it's amazing to see. I mean, he's an unbelievable young man, and just the joy that I saw on this dad's face when we were talking about it, and I said to him, I said, "Now let me ask you a question." I said, "I bet you there isn't a single achievement at work that you've ever had, no matter how great, that could top even remotely what it means to see how well your son is doing right now." And he said that, yeah, absolutely not. And I think, again, the biggest amount of regret that people have in life is not about money or work or cars or any sort of other thing. It's around relationships. It's around family. It's around you see people that work and work, and I was even one of those in my 20s and 30s. I kind of almost hated money. I was like, I want to make as much money as possible because I hate having to worry about it. And when I have enough, then I won't have to worry about it. And what that drives you to do is to work a ton and to not be with your family. And then what's happening is you're missing out on the most important formative years of your children. And when all that, again, we've talked about this before, when we lost everything in the 2008 real estate crash, I saw what mattered most, and that's how Me came about. But also, I remember having a conversation with somebody that wanted me to interview for a promotion, and as a person I completely respected, it would have been an awesome job. And when I asked him how much travel, it was going to be anywhere for 3 to 4 times a week. And my kids were relatively young at the time, and I said, I really appreciate it, but unfortunately I have to turn it down because it's not going to allow me to be the husband and father that I want to be. And that was a really hard thing to say. But in the big picture, I'm so glad I did that. And because it allowed me to be home, to coach my kids in middle school and high school, and to be involved in things. And now I look at my kids in my 20s, in their 20s and 22, and the relationship we have, had I made the decision to be gone, to make more money, to climb the corporate ladder, I would have totally missed out. And I just, the biggest regret that I see at people in their 50s and 60s is the lost time they have with their kids they can't get back. And their kids are out of the house and they live maybe a few states away, or even if they're in the same city, because the relationship isn't great because they didn't invest in it when they were young, it's strained, and they're trying to have to rebuild it. You can rebuild anything, but the time lost is I think the biggest regret that I see people have.
Well, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I think we all know people that have passed away at a very young age.
Yeah.
And there's a mindset that most people have where you educate until your early 20s, you work, 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 and then you retire and you have leisure and you live this very full life and until you're 100 years old. And But the reality is that that's not everybody's story. And we are not guaranteed tomorrow. And so if you're listening to this and regretting how you kind of spent those years where you didn't spend enough time investing in things that were important, you can start today. You can start today. If you are somebody who doesn't normally get home for dinner, you're currently, well, then pick a day a week or 2 days a week that you're going to have a family dinner. Recognizing that there are a lot of commitments, but I just think it's important just around that intentionality because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and we honestly don't want to regret missing out on something really important in the big picture.
Yeah, and it was actually really cool to see those two couples that came over during the Christmas break, and between the two couples, they had a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, there was a 1-year-old, and then there was a 2, 3 month old. And my wife and I just remembered we'd absolutely loved it, but like how crazy and hectic it is. Kids running around everywhere, and you go through this stage when the kids are young. It's just hectic. You're just trying to get through. And I know one of the sayings that I've loved the most that I think is so true is that the days are long and the years are short. And it's not just with the time with your kids, but then the other thing is the time with your spouse. And to remember to consistently still try to take time to catch up with for my wife, to go out and to keep dating my wife, because eventually we're empty nesters now. And there are people that when their kids go off to college, they look at each other, and instead of really being a spouse, it's more like a roommate. And sometimes it's even a stranger because you've just spent so much time just focusing on kids and that's it. You haven't cared much about each other. So it's a whole new relationship that has to be rebuilt when, we would try to do things even though we didn't have family close by, whether it was bringing our kids with us, which sometimes we got up in the middle of eating because we had to, because kids were going crazy, or you get a sitter or whatever it is. But that intentional time in your 30s, with your spouse is something that you will pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, when I think about that time and explaining that just what you just talked about, one of the biggest impediments to a healthy marriage in your 30s, if you have kids and you're balancing career and kids and family, are unspoken, unmet expectations. You have expectations of your wife or your husband, and you haven't verbalized that. And you are like two ships passing in the night. My wife and I are involved in a marriage ministry with our church, and this is one of the things that we talk about, and that comes up often around communication and talking about expectations, talking about things that where you can be loving on each other in ways that are meaningful. Because if you don't talk, you're just going to be two ships passing in the night, where you're trying to work and raise a family and get your kids everywhere they need to go, and but you miss the most important relationship in the family, which is the husband and wife.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway, I guess, is if we're going to wrap that one up, is just that unaddressed neglect now turns into regret later on in life. So I think it's really important. I mean, even for myself, just now getting into my 30s, and just listening to you guys share your wisdom about that has already given me a number of things that I can take away and implement even today. Looking to get into the 40s now, it's really multiplication and mentorship. What are some of the main focuses in the 40s?
Yeah, I think in your 40s and 50s, in life, your kids are probably now getting close to their teens. They're a bit more independent in some ways, not like you're just running around chasing them to make sure they don't hurt themselves. And so besides just, loving and caring for your family, also is how are you growing the people around you? How are you building into your colleagues at work, friends, et cetera? How are you then stepping back and then the mentoring younger people to help them again just try to understand some of the mistakes you made and some wisdom from what's happening. And I know with the high school boys group that I started, they were anywhere from 14 to 18 years old, and I was in my 30s at the time. I remember parents saying what a blessing it was for me to come alongside, and sometimes I was just saying the same thing parents were, but ultimately a different voice. Sometimes people listen differently, and it's cool to see those kids now, not the kids, they're actually obviously men now. They're actually mentoring younger people. And so the same thing is in your 40s and 50s is you have quite a bit of just knowledge that you've learned, and how can you make sure instead of just growing yourself, how can you grow other people, and making sure that you're coming alongside them in a way to help them see and focus on what really matters most. Because again, in the 20s and 30s, sometimes we're just, crazy with young kids or just getting married and trying to learn a job and move to a new city. But now hopefully you're somewhat established and you can really build into other people.
Well, I think it's helpful. There are a lot of benefits of mentoring and talking about the road that you traveled and helping somebody that's about to go down that road. One, it allows you to review and be thankful for all the experiences that God put you through, both good and bad, because all of that has shaped you into who you are. There's a lot of positive that can come from that. And again, sharing wisdom helps people navigate life better. There's a local church in Charlotte that in their mission, one of their goals was to help people to struggle well with life. And yeah, life is a struggle. It's a roller coaster. There are ups and downs, but we want to struggle well. We want to know that, hey, we're hitting a valley and we know that we're going to get through that. But again, mentorship and speaking into lives that are entering into the season that you just came from or came through, and they can learn from you. It just is such an important reminder that struggle is temporary and there's light on the other side of the hill.
Yeah, I think it was C.S. Lewis that said that one of the biggest things that we can do is be vulnerable and just share our experiences and even our hard ones, being broken bread and poured out wine for other people. He said, that one of the greatest things that actually starts off a friendship is when someone says, "You too," and they realize that someone else is going through what they've been, and that, to your point, maybe they've been there and they've gotten through it and they have tips, or maybe they're walking through it at the same time. And what a blessing that is. But also, I mean, I think, really looking at, when you're in your 40s, is your kids are probably in their teen years. And one of the biggest things that I wish I would have done more of is, I feel like in some ways I've enabled my kids, and I've let them, whether it's play or do other things. And sometimes just in the midst of just busyness of life, if I needed to get something done, instead of bringing my boys over to say, "Hey, you do this, I'll tell you how to do it," and it takes twice as long to do it, because I'm in a hurry, I'm like, you guys, it'll slow me down. I'm just gonna do it myself. And that's the worst thing I could have done. And what I should have done is been really smart and protective with the time. And sometimes you have to say no to good things to say yes to the best things, and making sure that you help your kids, again, understand that you're trying to build into them, and don't just enable them. Help them, empower them to learn to do things on their own so that they can grow some independence. It helps them critically think, helps them problem solve, where if you just do it for themselves, it's just like a GPS, where if you just follow GPS and that's all you do, you never know the name of the roads. You never actually, what happens if your GPS goes out? What if your phone dies? Whatever, you can't get home. You don't even know where you are. And so I think just making sure that you're finding a way to speak into your kids while you have them, and empower them to make decisions, and to teach them to do things that maybe you weren't taught at a young age. You had to learn on your own.
Mhm. All right. Well, if we're going to look at landing the plane now, we're going to go to the 50s and beyond. And that's really all about stewardship and wisdom transfer to other people, investing into something that will outlive your days and your life. So, some of the primary focuses in the 50s.
Well, this is a season that I'm in, Chris. This is a season that you're in, and growing older is not a bad thing. It happens to everybody, and this is really about how we view this season with intentional purpose and joy. There are people that I know that are absolutely depressed getting older. There are others that embrace it and are the happiest people I know in their 70s and 80s because of how they see their role in life in sharing wisdom, sharing perspective. I had this experience once at Costco here in Charlotte. I was sitting in the food court area, and this older gentleman just came up to my table and said, "Hey, can I sit down with you?" And I'm like, "Sure." And at first I was caught off guard, and I didn't know kind of what was going on there. He is somebody who spent time, he lives about an hour outside of Charlotte, and he comes into Charlotte once a month to shop. And he looks for as many new conversations as he can have. He was in his early 80s at the time. And it was just awesome just to understand and see the important truths that he has learned in his valuable life. He was a World War World War II veteran, and just his life lessons. And he just wanted to share those. So again, I just think about this time as you have a life well lived, and how do you share and help people who are going to be walking in your shoes?
You've talked about this before, the Harvard Adult Development Study, and it was a study, I think it was in the 1920s or 30s is when it started, and now not only are they following the children of those men, they're actually following children's children, and so what they saw though through that is, they had 720 something men. Half were from Harvard University, half were from, the basically the slums and the tenant towns uh, in Boston. And as they followed their growth, what they saw was there were people from the tenements that became, doctors, lawyers, and did great things. And there were people from Harvard that, didn't, they were just factory workers or whatever, it ran to. But what they found was long term, what was the biggest determinant of their health and happiness in their 80s was not how much money they made, the roles they had. I mean, there are actually even, I think, two presidents that came out of that study. And what they found was the biggest determinant of people's health and happiness was the health of their relationships in their 50s. And so when you look at people that not only have a few friends, I mean, again, if you have 5 friends, what a blessing that is. I mean, just to even have a few good friends, as well as a spouse that actually deeply cares about you. They even found people that even if they and their spouse bickered, but they knew deep down that that person was there for them no matter what, that allowed them to be not only healthier cognitively, but they had slower decline cognitively as they aged into their 80s and 90s. And so, again, it's just focusing on relationships and making sure that we have. I think one of the things that messes us up most in relationships in any aspect of life is incorrect expectations, and we think someone should do something instead of having grace and saying, you know what, I just want to love and care about that person, and just treat them well and help them know how loved and valuable they are. And I think if you're a leader, when things are going crazy in your family, if it's at work, the leaders are the ones that create calm in the midst of chaos, and they're a stabilizing presence when they're on other people. And so, if you can make sure people know their value, that they know that they have a great purpose, you help them understand and know what their goals are, and keep encouraging and pointing them toward their goals. But also reminding them of holding themselves to a standard, and making sure that they reflect on who they are and who they want to be. And I mean, I know for my boys, it's trying to remind them of a standard of what a man looks like and how we're called to lead and to love and to live.
And I think it's being thoughtful about people around you that don't have community. And if you're in a workplace, there may be 25 people that in your workplace, and there are people that are a part of your team, that are your coworkers, that are your employees, that they don't have anybody in their life speaking truth into them. They don't have that community. And if you're observant, you can see and seek those people out and invest in them and ask them how they're doing and come alongside them. Because when I think of everywhere that God has us, we're there for a reason. And I just think that there's those opportunities to really love and invest in the people that are around us, and make the people's lives that we come in contact with better.
And I mean, again, just back to generational impact, and the marriage that I have with my wife is an example and hopefully a good model for my boys into how they should treat their wife, and the generational impact of how they've been treated as boys becoming men. Then how are they going to do that with their kids and their kids? And this, the generational impact, the ripple effect that goes out from the life that we have. Are we making sure that we're intentional with that? And realizing that the impact isn't just this moment. The impact goes out so much further and touches so many more lives than we could ever imagine. People will never meet. And if we hold tight to that and remember that we're walking towards something that's great, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we have to make sacrificial decisions that aren't fun, or we have to give instead of getting. And there's nothing greater than seeing your kids become great people. And then obviously the ripple effect going out from that.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for sharing all that perspective. I Hope that the listeners have appreciated hearing that as much as I have. Just to conclude today, no matter the season, it's never too late in life to shift your mindset. Remember that outward focus will always produce an inward clarity, and that you can build a legacy by serving other people, not serving yourself. So if you're looking for one final takeaway from today, remember that when you align your focus with your season, you stop chasing life as it slips away and you start to build something that lasts. Thanks for listening.